probably my biggest mistake as a founder in the very beginning was not naming my needs to the rest of my team. I just tried to shoulder everything and protect them from the strain of an early stage startup rather than saying like, actually, me being exhausted is really not a win for this whole team.
Every week here on More Than Profit, we explore the stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and investors who have made a difference in the world while building successful businesses. We sit down with each guest and dive into their personal journey, their struggles and triumphs, and the lessons they've learned along the way. On this episode, we sit down with Julia Carter, the founder and CEO of Flaire. She spent the past 15 years growing technology companies, split between working at Google and building and selling startups alongside a serial entrepreneur. Prior to her career in tech, Julia graduated from the University of Virginia and lived in Kampala, Uganda, where she worked for the International Justice Mission. Julia's love of travel and passion for impact have culminated in this exciting new venture. Julia's passion and eternal optimism make her a rare founder who's working hard to make more places accessible to travelers and ultimately build empathy for the people and places you encounter.
I've grown up traveling. My dad was in the military, so we moved 8 times in 12 years. I've lived overseas 6 years, so I love to travel. I don't get to do it as much as I used to, but...
You still travel a lot, Bryce. You travel a lot.
Well, I say that. I travel for work. So to travel for fun with my family, doing really cool adventures, I definitely get to do it more than most, but not to the degree I'd love to. So, but all that to say, because we've traveled, and Brian, I know you travel a lot, we have either funny or kind of horror stories related to travel. And so I was thinking about it kind of coming into this podcast today, and probably my worst one of late was that one from Denver. I was flying back from Denver. It was supposed to be a direct flight back to Louisville, and Louisville's horrible. It's just horrible to fly into anyways. So I had this direct flight. I get to the airport, and they canceled it because they needed the plane for a more prominent city, I suppose. And I got redirected through Newark, New Jersey, to get home, which obviously makes sense. You fly from Denver to go to New York to get to Louisville, Kentucky. But anyways, that's what I was going to do. I get to Newark and my flight got delayed because of mechanical issues, and it was delayed for 14 hours. They never wanted to cancel it because then they'd have to pay for my hotel. And so I finally just went ahead and got a hotel, and I was going to get up at 6 o'clock for my flight. And then in the middle of the night, they finally canceled it. Then I had to scramble to find a way back home. And they said there were no flights until the next day. And so then finally, I got a flight through DC to get back to Louisville. So that, of all my travel, that was by far the worst. What would have been a 2.5-hour direct flight ended up being a 24-hour around the US experience.
I give Bryce credit for this. The brother never complains. I would have been on the phone. I would have been angry with him that my flight got canceled. But Bryce is just like, yeah, I got home 6 days later. It's fine. No, it's fine. All that stuff.
I mean, when you live in a place like Louisville, Kentucky, I mean, you just come to accept it's going to happen. So
there's workarounds for that, but we can talk about that on another show. But yeah, so my thing with our guest today, and I'll let Bryce introduce, but with our guest today, travel to me is sacred. I love travel more than anything else. I love being with Laura and going to exploring cities and stuff. But with the way the internet works now, you can be catfished by hotels, by retreat centers, because what happens is, I mean, think about Airbnb, how you go on an Airbnb and you're like, oh my gosh, this place is a palace. And then next thing you know, you're like, this is a straight up loophole. Like, this is the worst. And then I get giggly going, it's all angles of cameras and stuff. And so our guest today is trying to help solve that by actually getting people who matter in talking about their trips and where they stayed and different things they've done. And I know that there's been different iterations of her company because there was something different. But where I go, I do think that this could be a huge market because I could use help. And so my wife, Laura, just actually signed up for the company Flaire, and hopefully we'll be contributors and actually we'll be
better travelers
learning from it.
So Julia Carter is our guest today. We've been friends for several years. She's worked with serial entrepreneurs in the past, and she's kind of now ventured out. But I think the reason she's really passionate about this, what I've learned of Julia, she herself is an avid traveler. I mean, she's been all over the world. I don't even know all the places she's been. At one point took a sabbatical, I think, from Google to do like a 4-month
quit her
job to go do this.
A sabbatical is a nice name for it.
Is there a story or a memory of like a bad or a funny experience in some of your travels?
So many stories of bad memories. Let's see. Well, a part of it, I will caveat by saying the places that I choose to travel, I just inherently love like gritty places that are like a little bit rough around the edges, but are like really beautiful with great people and things like that. So my love for travel really started. We traveled a bit as kids, and I always really cared about places. I was really sentimental about those. But the place I really fell in love with travel was when I studied abroad in Argentina. And I was there for about 5 months. I lived with the host family. One of my best friends from college came too. And I mean, we kind of like half went to school, but mostly just traveled around everywhere. And I mean, South American travel is full of great stories. There was my immediate memory, and this is just literally like popcorn, what's coming to mind, is we were too cheap. We wanted to go skiing at the end of our time. So we wanted to go back to Patagonia. We'd already been twice. We didn't want to buy a flight. So we're like, we discover this like great bus that can take us from Buenos Aires to Bariloche. So we're like, great, we'll get on this bus.
Which is how far? How far is that?
I don't even remember. I mean, long enough to be stuck on this long bus with a crazy bus driver for way too long. And so, yeah, I don't know. I could be totally wrong, but it's like felt like 15, 17 hours, something like that on a bus. And so you pile in, and I remember it like gets dark. We're going around these curves, and something like a book fell out of one of my friend's bags, and it happened to be a devotional book that then this bus driver, in Spanish, he gets all excited and he starts looking at it. And then he starts showing us all of his missing fingers on his hands. And he basically says in Spanish, I'm so glad you're praying because I've wrecked this bus so many times and I've lost so many fingers.
Oh my gosh.
And I mean, the man is dead serious. I mean, he's just showing us one after one and like bruises on arms. And, we're like,
oh my gosh.
I don't think we're going to make it. But yeah, I mean, travel's full of those things. I think my husband and I have a phrase that we always use, and we learned it from a friend of ours in Australia, but we say discomfort breeds memories. I think it does. There's so many moments. When my husband and I were traveling in Australia, that one came into play because we were living with a family there. And they said, the only way to experience the Great Barrier Reef is to kayak it. They're like, that's what people don't know. And we're like, oh gosh, we didn't know that. We've never heard of anyone kayaking it. He's like,
because nobody does that.
Do. Yeah, because nobody does it, but nobody told us that. And so we like plan this, we're like dehydrating food. And I mean, my husband and I like a good adventure. I mean, we've never done this before. And so we're like for weeks dehydrating like curries. I don't even know why we thought that was a good idea, but we did. And we pack everything in, we get up to this spot, and they put you on a boat with like your kayak and a few other people, and they're dropping you at random places for like a week with a map. And everybody else was talking about, like, they were asking us what our latest kayaking feat was. All we could say was like, we did do like the San Francisco Bay Area one time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That was like the one time we kayaked.
For 30 minutes.
Yeah. And so, you get dropped on this island for a week. You like almost die a couple times, make it back, and have memories.
See, gritty. I love that. Well, so tell us who Flaire is. Tell us what you have going on right now.
So the easiest way to think about Flaire really is that it's a next-gen travel tool that uses social and artificial intelligence to help you keep track of where you've been and where you want to go. At its simplest core, that's what it is. In many ways, it feels a lot like a combination of like Pinterest for travel and Instagram for travel, because you're basically creating all of these lists of places that you've been, places you want to go, but they're not just your generic like top 10 places in Paris. It's like dive bars in Paris that I loved, best beaches in the world, places where you can go fly fishing in the US. You're seeing a lot of creativity come out in the way that people think about places and spaces.
I was just going to say, why Flaire? Like for you, I mean, you've done a lot of different things. You didn't have to do this. You had a sweet gig, and we'll kind of talk about your past a little bit, but why Flaire for you?
Well, it's interesting. So y'all alluded to this a minute ago, but there's been two different iterations of Flaire. So we kind of have Flaire 1.0 and Flaire 2.0. And the original version of Flaire was the same concept. So it's kind of social recommendations, this idea that I am sharing things I found with the people that I know and follow. And at first, it was across all consumer categories. And the idea really evolved because at the time I was with an innovation group in Atlanta. We had just built and sold 2 startups from the ground up. I was running the ideation team and doing kind of late stage business development. And the problem that I really had in my own life was in those 7 years that we had incubated and sold these 2 companies, I also had 3 children. And all of a sudden I became like the shopper of all of these people. And it felt like everything in the consumer space had become this massive research project just to make one purchasing decision. And at the end of the day, we just wanted to know what our friends were buying and using. And so Flaire really was this effort to say, we have these really powerful social media platforms out there that connect people. Why can't we use those for productivity? Why can't we use that to connect people to solve problems in everyday life. And so it started out of that, and really kind of this idea that it's transitioned to travel really came because we specifically targeted Gen Z, because we saw so much activity in the way that they live their lives and socially share things and just evolved in that way. And in the midst of all of our work with these young 20-something-year-olds, we saw that they were just obsessed with travel. That was like the number one thing they wanted to talk about. It was during the pandemic, so there weren't all these studies out saying that Gen Z was so into travel. It was actually just this kind of hidden thing that we were starting to see. And we knew, okay, if there's this big thing going on during a pandemic when people can't go anywhere and all these people want to talk about our places, like I loved to travel when I was in my 20s, but I was kind of an exception. Like I wasn't the norm. This is like, it has now become trendy to be the traveler. And so we just knew it was going to be huge. So we literally tossed everything aside that we had built for 2 years. I probably had $50,000 left in the bank. I went out and like re-fundraised on a vision, and we built the whole thing from scratch, all around travel, which obviously, as we mentioned in my own life, has so many layers of meaning, because I am such a believer in what travel does to an individual, to a friend group, for exposure, for countries, there's just so much.
So give us some background on yourself, because I do think watching your journey is interesting. So, because we met how many years ago?
Gosh, it would have been at least probably 5 to 7 years ago.
Okay. And were you pregnant with your youngest or middle at that time?
Pregnant with the youngest
at
that time. So right in that cycle. Yeah. So, my journey, like it's definitely not been, I think it's funny right now because we spend so much time with people in their 20s. And we, at one point, were spending a ton of time with college students, and that's who we were incubating a lot of the products with. And it's funny because they would look at where I was and just what I was doing and what my career journey had been. And it looked really great to them. And I had to keep saying to them over and over again, like, you're getting a very glamorized perspective. Like, this has not been a glamorous journey by any stretch of the imagination. So I can give like a quick.
But it has been glamorous in the sense of going, so you finished your education at where? Where were you at?
University of Virginia. Go Hoos.
Yeah. So obviously you're very smart, because obviously to get in there, I know 2 other people that are married that probably weren't so smart and they were there, but I know other than them, I do think that's an academic school. So you're smart. So you graduate from there, and then you end up doing what?
But to be clear, like when I was there, first of all, my friends literally thought I would never pick a major. They like sat me down and said, the point of college is not actually just to take classes in anything you're interested in. Like you actually have to pick something and like study that thing the whole way through. Because I really was like, I was such a nerd. UVA was a great fit. I was like so intellectually stimulated, thought everything was amazing, but ended up like I was a history major and a Spanish minor. And so it's definitely not your natural track to being a tech entrepreneur. But so much of my story has gone because I have always moved into places where I feel like curiosity and problem solving drives most of my decisions. And so that's kind of how it unfolded. So I was really interested in social justice. I graduated a semester early. I'd finished most of my courses, was like a part-time student.
Because you're very smart.
The LSATs.
Very smart, yeah.
No, carried over a bunch of credits from high school, which helped. And so I took the LSATs just because I had the bandwidth to do it, and moved to East Africa after college to work for an international human rights firm, thinking like I would carry that into law school afterwards. But I never went to law school.
Okay. And then why? So tell them why you didn't.
But I had LSAT scores. I did not go really because I loved Uganda. I was in Kampala, Uganda. I was working for the International Justice Mission. It's a great organization. But really, I think the problem that I got super interested in was not law. It was actually business, because there were so many brilliant Ugandans who were just knocking on the door looking for jobs. And I wanted to solve that. I saw what it looks like to experience rampant joblessness in a culture. And you have this body of people who just really wanted to work and couldn't find an avenue to do so. And so I wanted to figure out how to create jobs. But literally in all those classes that I took at UVA, I did not take a single business class, not one. Like I literally thought of business as like stodgy suits, blah career. Even the word career I hated. And so it just was like this thing I didn't want to do. At that point, I didn't want to go to business school. I actually just wanted to learn what, quote unquote, what business was from people who did something that I really respected that mattered to me. So the truth of where I ended up in technology is just because I was an executive assistant to the head of the office, which I should never be hired for ever.
Because you're not the most organized person. Is that what we're saying?
I'm definitely not. I cannot. My biggest takeaway from that job was that I needed to work hard enough to get my own executive assistant because I really needed one of those. So I was awful as an executive assistant. Very humbling job.
Well, you were on time to this call. So
yeah, you were. I was on first. Bryce was the last one.
Yeah.
But on the last call, we did have a FaceTime recently or a call, and you showed up a few minutes late, but you were quick to say,
it's okay.
That's just who I am.
You know?
And there was no judgment on my part.
True.
So, yeah.
I think y'all should feel really honored. Like, this is, I think, the first meeting I have showed up to on time that I can remember.
Yeah.
Truthfully.
That's amazing. I am honored.
My husband and I take separate cars to church. Everything. I mean, we just can't. I literally cannot get somewhere on time.
Well, Julia, the thread that I think is really interesting is you didn't really necessarily care about business. You didn't take classes. Now you find yourself in business. But the thread is really you just wanted to help people.
And you're a learner. You love to learn.
You love to learn and you wanted to help people. Like you wanted to go to law school, I'm sure, because you thought that was the best way to help other people. You were working with the IJM because you were passionate about emerging markets and doing justice in the world. So I'm sure that, again, has driven your direction towards business. But where did that original drive come from? Were you always thinking of others as you were growing up? Were you always kind of involved in clubs in high school or whatever? Was that something that just kind of was a part of your experience as a young person? Or is that something that came about because of certain circumstances?
As a middle child, I've always been a feeler, a very sensitive person. It helps and hurts as an executive to be really sensitive and a feeler, but that has always been a part of it. I think my faith was always important to me as a kid growing up. I loved impact has always mattered. I've always felt like I'm part of a bigger story and that there are things much bigger than myself that are out there. And I think the part of me that was attracted to law is the same part of me that is attracted to startups, because I think there is this idea you're chasing justice for everybody. You're chasing equitable scenarios. You're chasing better experiences for people. And I think that's been a big driver of all that I've done. And so, I mean, I think I'm very driven by impact much more than anything else. And I think that idea of creating change, I don't know that I could have named it in high school, but it definitely played out in a lot of the decisions and things I did in college.
And are your siblings like this also?
So they are. Like, my siblings like travel, they like change, but they're very different. I would say, like,
they don't care about people like you do. They're not feelers. Oh gosh, I hope they don't listen to this.
They definitely care about people. My older sister, we're 2 years apart. It's funny, growing up, people always thought we were twins. We actually went to different high schools so that my parents could give us different personalities. Like, it was just this idea of they literally thought we weren't going to make friends. They sent us to a counselor as kids because we didn't want to have friends over because we liked playing with each other too much. We still live 5 minutes from each other. And so, but just very different. I think truthfully, even as a kid growing up in high school, I felt different because I watched my older sister and I wanted to be like her. And outwardly, in so many ways, I was like her. I literally physically looked like her. We both were tennis players. We both worked hard in school. We went to school. She went to Washington and Lee. We were 30 minutes apart in school. And yet I was actually really different. My drivers, I think I carried a stronger ambition, this kind of unrelenting energy that I couldn't really put a finger on or name. And I think you don't even feel really at home in your own skin with that sometimes.
If you're part of a homeowners association who's interested in saving money on home services, let me tell you about PIN Plus, the ultimate platform that brings neighbors together under one powerful concept: power in numbers. With PIN Plus, homeowners associations can now access group discounted pricing on essential home services, trash, pest control, pool maintenance, and so much more, all at unbeatable rates. The best part, PIN Plus is designed for you, the community members. Manage your accounts, pay bills, sign up for services, and discover exciting community-wide events, all with a simple tap of a button. Your entire community, united as one customer, allows them to negotiate fantastic deals with trusted vendors in your area. So why wait? Unleash the power in numbers today and transform your home service experience. Download the PIN Plus app from the App Store or Google Play Store, or visit www.mypinplus.com for more information.
So you leave Africa and then you end up with Google. Is that right?
That's right. So I ended up with Google really because the IT person in our office was obsessed with Google. And it was this joke in the office. He just said, Julia, his name was Jemba. He said, Julia, I would never leave Uganda, but for Google, yes. And so I just said, I'll just go get that job at Google. I need to get a job anyway. But the more I looked into it, the more I actually really liked. I literally picked it because of its mission statement. This was 2007 when I was in Africa. And like the people I was around in Uganda just loved Google, like access to information that they had, that they weren't relying on other people for that information. Like it was just, they equated it with the internet. And so anyway, yes, ended up at Google back in Atlanta, was there for about 5 years, took my quote unquote sabbatical in the middle during the recession when my husband and I quit our jobs. And yeah, we quit.
And you traveled for how long?
We quit. It was awesome. We decided on our honeymoon that we would quit a year from then, and we traveled for a year. And so we bought one-way tickets to Australia, and then we lived there for 6 months, worked a little bit, mostly traveled. It was a very unique experience. We were living with a family, and honestly, it was kind of like, he has lots of incredible gifts, but it was kind of like having a marriage counselor right there. So it was like intensive marriage counseling almost for your first 6 months. So I actually call Australia the hospital. We love these friends dearly. They shaped our marriage in so many ways. That was not like the fun part of the trip. I would say when we bought our around the world tickets and ventured around the world for the next 6 months, that was a lot more like playing.
Okay. So then you come back and you go back to Google.
That's right. So I went back to Google. Honestly, I spent a lot of time in my 20s. And I think that transition, we kind of glossed over it, but that transition from going and helping orphans and widows in Africa to helping Google with the home shopping network, like increasing their click-through rates, like that was actually a hard jump for me, just in terms of the way that I thought about the value of work. And it was hard for me to process and just kind of put a finger on like, okay, I know this is good work for some people. It's lost a lot of that layer of meaning that I was so searching for. And so it kind of kickstarted this journey of just me thinking like, what is the purpose of work in my life and in general? And like I said, I'm a feeler, I'm a thinker, I care about impact, and wrestling with that in your, like when you're early on in your career, especially when you're a peon at the bottom of the totem pole who like does billing and contracts. That was a heavier thing to process. When we were traveling, the reason I went back to Google really is I kind of came to this thought of, okay, I guess we are going to start having kids. A job can just be a job. Maybe it's not going to be. I loved Google as a company and learned so much, but the work I was doing, I wasn't totally jazzed about. And so I went back thinking like, yeah, we took a year off. I need to go work. We're living with my parents. I need to go make some money. This is a good place to do it. And so, I mean, honestly, like a weekend, I'm like, I don't think a job can be a job for me. I think it can be for a lot of people. And I know there are seasons where you just have to grind at things you don't care about, but I just knew it wasn't where I was going to be long-term. And I wasn't looking around, but I ended up meeting up with a serial entrepreneur, and he had just gotten this big investment. The timing was good for them. It was not great for me. I was pregnant when I left, which is like not a normal thing to do. So first time I left Google was during a recession. The second time was when I was pregnant. Both of those things are not normal.
Well, but even though I think that for the listener's sake, I just go, there is something to you, even your character where, I mean, you were encouraged to stay on because you could get covered, you could have the baby, and then they're going to pay for, certain, and then you leave. But that wasn't who you are. You're like, I'm not doing that. I'm just going now.
Totally. No, I mean, I think you always want to think about people in business versus men or women in business. But at the same time, like there is this play going on of men and women in business, and it does feel different sometimes. And I think when you make choices as a female, like when I want to make authentic choices my intention is, I am probably loyal to companies to a fault. I always gave like crazy warning whenever I left companies, like that was not usually advantageous to me, but I just think of them as people and entities. And I wasn't just going to coast in a place that I wasn't going to stay and add value.
But I think that's good.
What is it like balancing all these things? So you said you felt a sense of obligation at Google, but then, to just treat it like a job, but it's not really kind of in your DNA. What is that like for you to kind of balance? So, because Brian and I, obviously, we're dudes. We don't oftentimes think about our family life in the same way that you might. I started Access Ventures. I have 4 kids. I'm married. So I have all the pressures that you feel as a founder and those things. But I don't oftentimes feel acutely the day-to-day decisions that you might feel as a mother, as an entrepreneur, as a provider. How do you balance all that? And what does that look like as you're kind of trying to grow Flaire right now?
And especially as a feeler. So you're feeling for your kids, you're feeling for your employees in a way. And because I think we're all feelers, but especially with you, watching you make decisions.
It's interesting. It's been a journey on that note. It's funny, right now, I have a great strategic advisor, Steve Graves. I met him through the Praxis community. And something that he's really been helping me with is to not lean into my tendencies to be a matriarchal leader and make decisions that are loving and good, but as an executive, not as the feeler that I naturally am. Because I think that's been a tougher thing for me to manage that I've seen. And I don't think that's necessarily a male versus female thing. That element is just a personality thing. And so I think you got that on one side, to Brian's point. But I think, Bryce, to your question of just how to manage that, I think the kind of mother side of this, I think the places where I feel tension, we were just talking about this before the call, but I think there's a lot of instances with the kids, and I'll notice just differences in the way that me and my husband respond to different circumstances. Example being trips and travel away. There's a lot of calculation that goes on when I think about being away from the kids. And okay, if I'm going to do this trip, then I'm not going to do that one. If I'm going to be away this weekend, I'm going to try and only be away one night during the week if we have something going on in the evenings. Like I'm not going to stack them up multiple nights in a row because I want to be there for bedtime and the whole thing and not feel like I'm going on to something else. This whole dance that I'm doing in my head is not a dance I see my husband Evan doing. And he is an incredible father to our children. He loves them very much, but like he doesn't feel that pressure. I think likewise, there's a lot of events that are happening in the kids' daily lives at school that I actually genuinely want to be a part of, but can't in my schedule. And previously it was easier. Honestly, it was easier to make those choices when I was working for an innovation group and had a boss who was kind of dictating that for me. There was, to some degree, I could make choices, but I also was accountable to that. When it's all on my shoulders as the founder to make those choices, they become much more difficult because you're saying, actually, I technically could do any of these things. Is it the right thing for me in the business? No. So the short answer to your question is the way that I handle that is very practical. I'm staring at my whiteboard wall right now. It's one of my greatest gifts of the last year is that I've taken our youngest child's nursery and turned it into my office. And it has one huge whiteboard wall. And literally every Friday, I block out 2 hours of the day. And I go through kind of like, what were the priorities this week? What did we accomplish? What did we not? What are the priorities next week? And I have 5 priorities that are like work priorities and 5 home priorities that I put on that whiteboard wall. And it protects me from the guilt because I think what I've learned to do is take the things that formerly would have made me guilty and instead just take action on them. So it's like, okay, if I feel like I'm not showing up at school, then next week, one of the priorities is like, I'm showing up at my kid's lunch because I feel like that's the thing I'm missing. So I think it's doing something with the guilt rather than just sitting with it.
Well, and I appreciate you saying it's not always a male-female thing too, because as a founder, oftentimes I get this even just from my wife. It's like, well, do you have to go on that trip or do you have to? And it's like, well, I guess I don't have to. Like I am choosing from a business perspective to go do that, but it is important. And so then there's that guilt that I have of like, I'm choosing to go do this thing. So therefore I'm not choosing to spend time with so I think there's that constant tension, and maybe it's the middle child because I'm also a middle child too.
Well, yeah, he is a middle child, but he's an overcarer too. Like he really carries the weight of.
But I do the same things.
I mean, similar.
I check in with my wife on a regular basis. Hey, am I traveling too much? What's the right frequency? Do you care about? What I found is she doesn't love the like the 4, 5, 6 day trips. She prefers. She's like, you can do as many 1 night, 2 night, 3. It's not. Those are no big deal because she's already got everything kind of figured out. So just kind of doing those check-ins I've found to be helpful.
I think it's really true. I mean, there's also some just really practical things in this world of working from home. Like I split my time between office and home. And I think when I'm at home, I do that once or twice a week. I'm working at home in the afternoons, so I can see the kids when they get off the bus. So I can be there. It's a 10-minute diversion from what I'm doing, but it means something. It's making an impact on them to have me be available. And something that my husband and I were talking to a counselor that we see, and we were asking him, like, for the ages that our kids are, we have 3 little girls who are 9, 7, and 4. Like, what are the things that really matter that we should be mindful of? And one of the things he said was that one of us would be available in the afternoons when they're home from school. Like, doesn't have to be the point person. Like, we still have a nanny who's there, but that our door would be open if something happened. And so we try and really do that. But to guard against it, like, I also am your typical visionary founder who's like an ADHD mind that goes all over the place and can easily get distracted. And so I have a little like clock that sits on my door, and it's one of those like winding things that's the storefront, like open or closed. And so I put open and closed with a timer on it for when the kids can like come in and interrupt. So they know if they can't interrupt, like if I'm on a call, that there will be a time when they can. And so that's helped too.
But again, I just think that's all planning. And it's that thing going, I really believe your kids will be better for both of you working the way you're working, but also including them in the journey, like bringing them along. I just think I love that you have 3 daughters who are going to see their mom be this strong leader, businesswoman. And I just go, there's something powerful to that. So
I think knowing that I've time blocked that time on Friday and it's like, it's 2 hours and no more. Like I'm not gonna, this is everything we do. I mean, it's helpful as a startup leader who everything we do is experiments. Like as parents, everything we're doing are these mini experiments with our kids, and you bring as much love and intention as you can to those things. And then at some point you let it go and just say, And yeah, this is the choice we're making for now. We're going to live our lives and love our kids, because ultimately, if we're functioning as robots and not as humans, like that's not an asset to them. And so trying really hard to do that, but then just be like, hey, our kids are humans. They're going to have their own experiences. They're going to react different ways, and we're going to let them grow up. And that's part of it.
I do think culturally too, we still haven't made a lot of shifts that I think support the fact that one, women work or that both parents work or whatever. Because still, I mean, a lot of schools, they schedule things assuming someone at 2:00 in the afternoon can be there or come to this mother, daughter, father, whatever thing at noon. And it just sets up families to have, unfortunately, hard conversations. And so I just think there's a cultural paradigm that still hasn't been adjusted.
I think when I talk to like other female founders and business leaders, I think a big thing that we're struggling with is even beyond that. It's just like the mental load of the parenting that sits with you at home. So even with spouses who want to help out, who want to be involved, there's still this deflection to the mom that is just the natural. It's like literally in the kitchen. That is the word that's going to be, even if dad's there, it's like, Mom, will you help me with this? Mom, will you help me with this? And I think the same thing is, who's thinking about the play dates, who's thinking about the friendships that are happening, who's thinking about these things, who's organizing the schedules for the weekends. It's that stuff that weighs on people. And I think the thing that has taken me so long to learn, I mean, my oldest, like I said, is almost 10. It's taken me this long to just realize that, like, I think part of our job as women is to be able to identify our needs, really name them and solve them. And so it's taken like a very small example of this, which is a laughable thing that my husband really doesn't like that we did right now. But a few weeks ago, I just said, I'm kind of done making meals over the weekend. Like, we both work. I don't know why that's falling on me. I know that you don't like cooking, but actually neither do I. And so I am going to actually trade that off with you. And so we rotate who is on breakfast and lunch duty Saturdays and Sundays. And it's like that. It was a small thing to ask my husband to do and gave me tremendous freedom just to say, like, I don't have to be available for that hour. It's kind of mayhem anyway. So I might go for a longer run. I might phone a friend. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I am not the one responsible. And I think when I make those choices, I'm less resentful. And I think a lot of what I feel like we as women are carrying is a lot of resentment that ends up hurting everybody. And so trying to figure out what to do with that has been a good journey.
I think the other thing that it allows for is it allows you to be your best self, which actually improves the quality of your family's experience and your children's lives. So you being able to go on the run or talk to a friend on a Saturday morning versus be responsible for all the meals and event planning, it allows Julia to show up for her kids in a way that they actually see a thriving, vibrant mom. And that's better than the bacon and eggs you might have made.
Especially knowing your husband a little bit, where I just go, and I know he wants you to be your best version of yourself, but I just think with you naming it, saying, hey, this would be helpful. And again, if Laura came to me and said that, I'd be like, oh, hell no, I do not want to cook. But I think it's important to be verbalizing, hey, this is what I need. And then it's a way that we can show up together. So I just go, I think that's super healthy. I mean, it's a whole lot easier. And because again, I just go, it's one thing to go, hypothetically, yes, we'll trade off every other week. And then, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I might have to travel that week. I'm so sorry.
And I think so often, and probably what y'all see too, is like the lessons that I'm learning as a mom and a wife and a friend and everything, like it's always translating back to what I'm learning at work too. The same needs, like probably my biggest mistake as a founder in the very beginning was not naming my needs to the rest of my team. Like I just tried to shoulder everything and protect them from the strain of an early stage startup rather than saying like, actually, me being exhausted is really not a win for this whole team. We're in this to win, and I actually need this kind of support and name it, whether it is like the right thing or not, saying like, this is what I need, whether or not that is the thing I should need, that actually is what I need.
And I think it can even translate to your kids, like as your company, God willing, takes off and does better, that you'd be able to verbalize to your girls saying, hey, I do need help with, and just verbalizing needs that you need in your relationship with them.
I think it's really true. And I think what was so surprising to me, and I see this in my friends as well, it was so surprising to me how hard it was to identify my own needs. I think there's a lot of roots in that, and I could talk for hours about that. But I think that was fundamentally a lot of the problem is like my hope for so many of female, honestly, just women in general, it doesn't even have to be in business. Like I think one of our big challenges is learning to understand and articulate our needs in a way that we can take action and control of those situations rather than just carrying resentment. I mean, I think there's so much around that.
So, Julie, taking it back kind of as we close up to Flaire a little bit, in just kind of that thread of impact for your life and desiring, what do you see as the impact of Flaire? Because I think some people are going to hear about this thread and your desire to impact people in communities. IJM makes sense. And being at Google, more of a learning experience and kind of building businesses. But what about Flaire as a company, as a mission statement? What is the impact that you hope it has as a company on the next generation or just on our world at large?
So I think there's really two big layers of impact that we're looking at with Flaire. And I think the most overt and obvious one is just perpetuating more travel. Travel is such a meaningful thing. It is something that matters to this generation. Making travel both more relational and more approachable for people so that it feels more accessible. That piece of it ties into the other piece, which is really trying to transform what social media is. I think in many ways, we have over the last 20 years created these massive social platforms that connect people in actually like quite amazing ways. I remember being at Google and having John Lewis, a big civil rights leader, come through the office, and we were touring him around, and he just looked at me and said, like, I can only imagine what this would have been like if the internet had existed during the civil rights movement. Like, what would that have been like to showcase all of these marches and movements and sadness much earlier in that? And so much like that, social media has connected people in really powerful ways, but it hasn't always used that in a great productive way. And I think there's a second layer of social platforms that is saying, okay, now that we can connect, what can we actually do together? And I have seen such beauty and depth and connection come from sharing the workload of everyday life together. And so, like I said, that is starting with travel, but that could carry over into other verticals and things like that as well. But just being able to share that, save time, efficiencies there, show people, tell stories, do those things. Because so much of travel, it's storytelling. Like people go places because they hear other people have gone. And I think to be able to have a platform where people are seeing not just that all of these people took these trips, because they can see that on social media now. The difference with Flaire is that we're showing you how you can take it too. Flaire is like a roadmap of how you can take that trip as well, with a lot of people who want to help you get there. And so it's just making travel more accessible for everybody and building these connections that are really powerful around that.
I think the other value of travel is it humanizes people that I think oftentimes are vilified in the press or in our education systems. And so as we travel, it humanizes people, the other. It allows us to see them as people that have families and desires, hopes and dreams, limitations themselves as well. And so I think to see people around the world as human beings is one of the benefits of travel, especially in our culture right now, when so much is going on and we just literally throw out on social media and other places in the news horrible, horrible things about living, breathing people in other parts of the country and other parts of the world.
And I think the hope with that is it does, to your earlier question of like where I started caring about impact, a lot of that tied into travel. Like being in Argentina right after they'd had a big economic crisis. Like that was 2005 when I was there. They had a terrible economic crisis right before. You're watching the suffering. Our host parents, like one of them was a geriatric doctor and had physicians just lined up outside the street day after day after day who had lost all their savings, all of it. They were getting services for free. And you're seeing this happen to this country right before your eyes. And I think you just can't live in a bubble when you experience those things. When you live in Africa, when you go to these places, like we took our kids to Cuba in last April for their spring break. And we rented a car, had a driver, and went all through the southern coast, like to places that tourists don't normally go. And our kids were exposed to for the first time to like what that is to live in places where they literally don't have food at the restaurants. Like they're out of every item on the menu because they don't have food. Like where no one has had work until we have arrived for months. Like you're exposing people and creating a sensitivity and creating this just global mindset. And I think our biggest challenge with Flaire right now, and I think the place where our whole team feels this way, is we are starting with this younger generation of travelers who, for those of you who are not as like familiar with kind of the Gen Z personality that's there, it is this stage of life when you really are encouraged to take risks. It's your 20s. You have chances to rise and fall. Like the world is out before you. And it's a very risk averse group of people, which is why they want something like Flaire to give them pre-vetted recommendations, because they're very afraid of going to quote unquote the wrong place. Like that whole idea of discomfort breeds memories. Like that's a little bit further. It's one step beyond where they're comfortable right now. And so in many ways with Flaire, like our hope is that we are taking our users building comfort with them to be able to go to these places with their pre-vetted recommendations to start their travel journeys that then bridge off into these much deeper, much more unique experiences that they uncover. And yes, so travel is huge for that. Last plug on travel that I think is so meaningful, and I could talk your ear off all day long, but it is, I think for travel, most people don't know a lot about the history of travel, but I think there's this really important analog that is like, it's not been around. Like travel for fun has not been around for that long. That's really a product of the 20th century, post World War II, when it was finally accessible for people to actually travel. And you have this thing that's evolved over time just in the last less than 100 years. And it has been the thing that rebuilt countries after World War II. Like there's a reason France is like the top tourist destination in the world. It wasn't one until then, until there was no way to rebuild that country except for travel. They went around and got American hoteliers to go to France to train them to do this. So, I mean, you just think about the countries in the world that are struggling. There is such opportunity for travel to be this economic driver that can rise that. And I think it's really exciting to us to think about not only making travel more accessible to people, but making more places accessible to travelers.
Thanks for listening to this episode of More Than Profit. We hope you are more excited than ever to get out and explore the world. Be sure to check out flaire.me to create your profile today. To stay up to date with More Than Profit, make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, drop us a review so others can find us as well. Don't forget to check out our new website at morethanprofit.fm, where we have additional content and past episodes. You can also learn more about what's ahead by following us on Twitter at listen_MTP. More Than Profit is a production of Access Ventures and is hosted by Bryce Butler and Brian McKay. Our executive producer is Crystal Escobar, and our associate producer is Bryn McKay. Audio production assistance is provided by Resonate Recording. Our theme song today was No Man's Land by Slapstorm. I'm Bryn McKay, and you've been listening to More Than Profit.